Before we start with the presentation, I have a couple of announcements to make. One is that, as you know, we have normally the Science Sunday on the second Sunday of every month. In June, we didn't have one because for logistic reasons, the very end of May, we had it, the June one at the very end of May, and that was about science and symphony, with great clips of science on the big screen with symphony orchestra music, and it's now on the web, on the YouTube channel, through our church website, as are nearly all the Science Sundays are there, so you can look back at them. So that's one thing. So please take a look at that. It's got some beautiful videos from Anne Barlow, who was here organizing that Science and Symphony. The other announcement I've got is I'm going to pass around a sign-up sheet with my artist collaborator. We have an art and science exhibition at the National Academy of Sciences, been there for the last few months in DC, and it's closing this coming weekend. And if anybody would like to go, I'm taking a group of people there who'd like to sign up to go on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock at the National Academy of Science. A beautiful place to visit anyway. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's on Constitution Avenue. So I'll pass this around, and maybe people can, if they want to go there at 3 o'clock, I have to get the names to them by Tuesday morning. So if you want to go on Friday afternoon, it'll be at the Keck Centre until December, but this is the best place to see it. So I'll pass that around. Thank you. Pass it around and sign up if you want to go or carpool. So thank you for that. And today we have Frank Tabir, who's going to give us a talk about renewable energy and the grid, sun, wind, and the century of technical debt. Frank is a software engineer, works for Google now, and he's been a member of the church this year, relatively new member, so welcome, Frank. Thank you.
Great.
If you have a question, wait for the microphone, or Frank will repeat the question.
Yeah, please. We'll see how this one goes, and particularly if there's anything, I have a picture in my mind of how we'll do it. If there's anything that's not making sense, or you have a question for clarity, please jump in. So, wanted to talk about. Nominally, it's about renewables, right? But we're going to talk about the grid a whole lot. I got into this, maybe we all know how important climate change is, and in order to really meet the moment, right, we need to completely decarbonize as quickly as possible, right? Renewables are a huge part of this. And you may have heard the idea that, they're bad for the grid somehow, or like, it's solar, like there's some problem with like how it doesn't quite fit. So my hope is that with everything that I'll go through, you'll be able to understand what that's all about, where the truth is, and then where some of it is talking points, and a lot of it is engineering that we can engineer around some really interesting stuff. So how I got into it, I am not strictly an electrical engineer. I've got solar panels on my house. This is my house, and also batteries. So what's cool is the whole house battery backup systems have come down in price, and I took advantage of the crisis of the tax credits expiring last year. I decided to finally pull the trigger, and in doing just a ton of research, I learned about some of this grid stuff that I will go through now. So, very cool. Solar panels will pay for themselves, batteries won't. And I got them because I thought they were awesome. Because also, I don't like blackouts. This is a picture from 2003 when the entire Eastern grid went down. It was it's like a textbook system failure instance that shows up. I've got a handful. I'm not going to read through all of them, but you see different cases of somebody trips something somewhere, one thing leads to another, the entire grid falls down. Interestingly, this hasn't been happening a whole lot. You notice the most recent one, or the most recent blackouts are usually because of storms, because everything kind of gets taken out at once. So there's a silver lining there that I'll get through at the end. But I wanted to, you read about, some high voltage line trips, and you say, like, well, how can that lead to one thing leads to another? Like, that's what I want to get into with this talk, which is everything is interconnected. So the grid is one big machine, and it's not a metaphor. It is quite literally physically connected, one thing to another, in a way that that is meaningful in an engineering sense. So I think also you shout out interdependence. It's not quite the same thing. It's the grid's not alive, right? But you'll see themes of like one generator or one load's effect on the greater whole. So I'm going to go into the physics itself, and then a history of the physics. This stuff is fascinating. So this is a self-propagating electromagnetic wave. Electricity and magnetism are two sides of the same coin, and we figured this out in the 1800s. Brief history lesson, I'll try to make it brief. In 1820, Hans Christian Ørsted was playing with a lecture demo and noticed that when he turned on the current, his nearby compass needle would twitch. And this is canonically like the first, like, oh, maybe these things are connected. And it was 1831 that Michael Faraday noticed that you have a coil of wire and you move a magnet around it, and that you could get a current to flow. So there's magnetism and electricity. You get, I think I'm going to jump back and forth between these two slides. These are Maxwell's equations, or at least they're called Maxwell's equations. Maxwell was a mathematician, brilliant and unified things. Faraday was sort of an experimentalist, and figured out a lot of this stuff and didn't quite have the math to like put it together. And they all sort of built on each other. Really fascinating aside here about Maxwell in, I think it was 1865 or so, took the experiments that were happening in electricity was over here, magnetism was over here, there was some light optic stuff, and he combined them into the system of 20 different equations that when he crunched the numbers, when he did the math, a self-propagating wave was about the speed of light, and he was the one who kind of put that together. We actually had what is this? So Weber and Kohlrausch in the mid 1850s did an experiment on static charge flowing, and they found this speed of light number, and they didn't quite put it together. The other one interesting thing I wanted to say about this guy Oliver Heaviside, who was just sort of a recluse, but when we talk about Maxwell's equations, these four of them are the canonical forms that you'll read about. Heaviside took the 20. He spent years actually learning the math because not Faraday. Maxwell was a very math guy. Heaviside combined them. So when we talk about Maxwell's equations, it's actually the Heaviside formulation. And because he was a telegraph operator, he was a practical guy, wanted to get things done. And this is kind of how we think about it. So the two, let's see, I can see over here, the Gauss's laws for electricity and magnetism. I don't need to say anything about that. The Ampere's law is the important one, I think, where when you move a magnetic field, you get a current induced. The other thing is, where's the negative sign? It's Faraday's law of induction. Maybe that's the one. I haven't read up on all the maths. What's that? Yeah, no, so that minus sign. So if you look at Faraday's law of induction, this is inducing current from a magnetic field. And also you can use a current to create a magnetic field, right? And this is kind of where I think I'm jumping ahead, but this is where you get into we can make an electric motor. The minus sign is super important because what it represents is the field produced sort of creates its own resistance current. So like if you're spinning a generator and the leads aren't connected, it's easy. And then as soon as you put a load on it, it gets harder. And it's because you're being slowed down by the magnetics of it. Here's a picture of a generator where you've got different poles. So I think if you imagine each one of them is wires, I think the wires are in the middle, and we're actually spinning the thing that is spinning is the magnetic field, and then the current is over here. Every generator is something like this, is an electromagnetic, is an electromagnet where you put some current in, get a magnetic field, and then you use some kind of power, some kind of force, right? So for hydro, it's moving water. Even nuclear is using uranium or plutonium to heat up water and then shove it through a turbine. Coal is you heat it up. It's all kind of the same thing. This is a picture of a motor here. Let's get into the history of the electric grid, because now we have motors more or less. You've got a motor and a generator are two sides of the same coin. Are you taking energy out to spin something, or are you putting energy in to then be able to transmit the energy? And this is sort of the brilliance of all these things. The other thing that just I'll leave here is you now have these rotating inertial masses. It just so happens, right? So you have these turbines that are big, heavy metal objects that you spin up, and then they stay at that speed, and they have literal physical inertia. And so we'll come back to that. The history of the grid. This is I'm not going to talk too much about the war of the currents, but I'm sure some of us have heard of it. DC versus AC. AC wins mostly because it's real easy to, with a transformer. Did I put a transformer in here? All right, we lost the transformer. But you can, with a transformer, you can step up and down voltage, but only if it's alternating. The idea being, we don't need to go into it. We'll talk about it afterwards if anyone's interested. But AC1, which means now you have these alternating current generators, and they start with, a single company, right? So this is like the Edison company is building dynamos and is paying people or people are paying him to electrify things. You'd have a local utility, but it would be literally your utility, and they'd have a generator in a building. Eventually, we continue on with this, and let's see, what do I have? Yeah. This was back in the, I think, late 1800s. You have this free-for-all of frequencies, and it's because, you can spin a generator at kind of any speed, and when you're dealing with physical machinery, some of them just want to be at different speeds. A turbine that's being pushed by air is going to be different from one pushed by water. They started standardizing. We won't go into the story of how they standardized. We ended up at 60 hertz. It was sort of a historical accident, but it's relevant. It's important because it's all connected together. You can't have, right? You can have multiple frequencies when you've got different interdependent, different completely unconnected grids. Once you try to tie them together, right, they need to be at the same frequency. I think that. So if you imagine going from not having a grid, right? You have a single generator and you're running a load off of it. then the same company has a couple generators and they sync them up, but still the same company. That's kind of what we had for a while. This is a synchronoscope that was, I think, patented in like 1902, 1901 or so. And the idea is you need to be able to attach the generators together. You can't just throw them together. Everything's got to line up, and it has to line up in a nice way. And so this becomes really relevant. You know, when you're one company, you still need this tech to do it. But now imagine you have multiple companies. Why would you want to? There are some good reasons. But to go through the four things, voltage is like the magnitude of the wave. Those need to line up. The frequency is one of the most important things, because if your frequencies are like, they'll resonate, they'll have harmonics, it'll be, you know, currents flowing in every direction. Physical things will break, right? Because of that Lorentz force. When you put a load or other magnetism, electricity and magnetism, it'll just put like physical stress on whatever you're spinning. The other thing is the phase angle has to be just right. So this is one where, like, imagine exactly the same frequency, exactly the same voltage, but the waveforms aren't lined up. They'll be pulling and pushing against each other. So that's still no good. And then the last one is kind of just like connect the right wires. So if you remember, we had where is it? This one. However many poles you have, get you those. You have to make sure that all of those are connected. So the first time this happened was actually very close to us. So our, what is it called? PJM is the regional interconnection that we are a part of. It started in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, and it was these three companies. That they were separate companies, and they had different consumer bases and different load profiles. And they actually paid they did a study. They paid some economists to say, like, is there anything we could do here to combine? Yes, it was something like $3 or $4 million a year. And it turns out this is a really good idea, because instead of one company having to handle its own demand and have be able to match just whatever the peak is, and then have all of that capacity be idle at other times of the day, you can pool it, right? So this is where we get into the pooling of grid resources. But in order to do that, you need to all be on the same frequency, and then you all need to tie in together here. At this point, it becomes like, this is sort of, I don't think they call it the first grid. I would call it a grid, but it's the first interconnection happened in 1927 as part of this combination. One good thing led to another, and then eventually you have, like, right, you just keep attaching separate islands of electricity, and then you get the interconnections that we have. It leads to, there's a lot of good that comes out of it, and then there are a lot of problems about, one cascading failure leading to another. So this is sort of if I have a thesis here, it's that the frequency of the grid is now something that we all are beholden to. Like, it affects every one of the companies, every one of the consumers, every one of the users. Here we have our interconnected system. So if you imagine that you have this grid frequency at 60 hertz, any deviation from that is going to put stresses on every generator, and it will, the generators are built so that the harmonics don't happen. Like, you don't want resonance at the frequency it wants to stay at, and so they will resonate at frequencies off of of 60 hertz, and it's something like, I don't remember if I have the exact numbers, but it's something like 59 hertz, right? It's like, you can't have that for more than something like tens of minutes in the entire lifetime of turbines. And so there's this safety tripping behavior that you need to be able to disconnect. If you're a power plant, you need to be able to disconnect from the grid in order to save your plant. What happens when you do that? Well, then the grid goes out. And if you're having a frequency degradation event, you want everybody to stay in and like pull their weight and push hard and try to get through it. So we need to regulate, essentially, is where we come in. I think this is so the grid inertia, let's talk about rate of change of frequency, which is called Rokoff. This is proportional to the inertia of the grid. And when we talk about inertia, like, it is backed by these massive spinning metal wheels. It gives a couple of seconds. It's like on the order of hundreds of milliseconds, so that when some big demand change happens or something trips offline, the physics is keeping the frequency the same. It gives enough time for other forms of control to come in that we'll talk about. So this, I think this one is the Texas ERCOT issue, where you see, I don't know, it's probably not easy to read, that at various of these points, there's also load shedding happening. And this is another part of it. Like, control is, let's try to stabilize the grid. And then also, completely without human intervention, you have demand tripping off. You need to basically reduce the load so that you can maintain this frequency, right? So wherever it dropped, right, those couple of minutes, it would have been even worse. It was very bad, and it would have been even worse, right, if it keeps dropping off and you get a complete drop off. This is the frequency response control hierarchy, right? So that synchronous inertial response, that is hey, we have this grid inertia. It gives you milliseconds. And then primary control is the plants throttle up, right? They put more, the turbines slow down, you increase the amount of gas flowing through it, and then it tries to speed it back up. Then you get to, I think secondary control is the one where people who have been paid, there are these markets in grid services, and so some people are being paid to just be there in order to inject power into the grid with batteries or with they're called peaker plants. They're usually natural gas are easy to spin up. And then the tertiary control is okay, let's stabilize. Let's use the cheaper energy over time. Not technically control, but the load shedding is sort of the last thing, is that we need to maintain the frequency. So if it drops too fast, it just automatically trips off, and that's why you'll get a blackout. It's in order to protect really the whole grid, and then the frequency. What do we got? Oh yeah, so I've sort of been hand waving it it's bad when you stay attached to the grid when the frequency is not what your particular equipment wants. Here are some examples of the really bad things that happen. So turbines will just explode. They'll resonate, and then the blades will break and fly off, and it will physically destroy the machine. Same thing with transformers. It's called flux saturation, something like this, where transformers are designed to certain specifications. When the frequency changes too much, the flux will spill out of the iron cores that contain them and create these eddy currents, and all sorts of things can happen, but things explode and things depressurize. And then I don't know how big a deal this is, but apparently 50% of grid load is motors. They also will heat up if the frequency is bad. So everyone individually connected to the grid, and their their equipment itself will have safeties built in to trip at various times. This one's actually kind of fun. I thought this is fascinating. So it's kind of an aside, but when you think of like, okay, we've got 60 hertz as the frequency. Back in like the 1920s, somebody was like, oh, I could run a clock off of this then, right? Like I can attach a motor to the grid frequency, and then I could have it run a second hand on a clock, and then I can keep time with it. And that only works if you're paying really close attention to the frequency. And so then they started saying, you made a deal. They started selling it as like high quality electrical services or what have you. People started using this, particularly in like heavy industry when, I don't know all the details, but the idea is like you have massive paper plants or something like this where everything has to be exactly synchronized and you need it attached to a clock. And so you can't just attach an atomic clock. Anyway, this still exists. And so they keep track of how far the frequency deviated from 60 hertz. And it's from 59.98 to 60.02 hertz. And they run it like fast or slow in order to keep the time. The industry hates this and keeps trying to get rid of it, but then other industries like say they still need it around. It's like this. This is the tech debt. This is fascinating stuff. Anyway, I said I would talk about renewables. Here's renewables. Mostly going to talk about solar for renewables. A little bit about wind, but if you notice, there's no moving parts. We don't have we no longer have spinning turbines or this property that we sort of assumed needs to be there. It's not there anymore. And what do we do about it? The way that, so solar panels produce direct current, and then you can go from direct current to alternating current with inverters. This is a microinverter. Basically transistors that switch really fast on and off, and then create a sine waveform. There's an interesting property. Apparently, it's not like that important, but it's a real thing. There's a grid service about injecting imaginary power. What is it? Reactive power, where even without power, the inverter bank can feed energy in at a different phase to try and like correct. We don't have to go into it, but it's a there are these properties of inverters. Most of them though are grid following. So talk about grid following inverters versus grid forming inverters. If you have a sine wave, like if you're attached to the grid, you have a sine wave that you can follow. You can just sort of the inverters will inject power according to the sine wave, but they can't modify it that much. They can only follow. And so this means like you don't have that inertia, right? So you imagine the grid like has less and less inertia, is less and less rate of change of frequency, and then you have a destabilized grid. So what can we do about it? We can make synthetic inertia. We need another form of energy, and so we have energy storage, right? So there's two things that energy storage does. One is peak shifting, where the sun is shining and then you store the energy for later. Then the other thing is fast frequency response. This is what lithium batteries are really good at, where as soon as the frequency drops, the batteries can like within milliseconds be injecting energy and keep the frequency where it needs to be. We kind of got lucky, honestly, with the power that is able to be brought to bear now with batteries. The lithium batteries coming much more cheaply. I'll talk about pumped hydro. So this used to be the way that we store energy, and it's still a big part of it. But you see, it's dropping as a percentage share, and that's because of so much battery storage coming online. The one difference, let's see, 250 gigawatts in, I think that's total amount. Like it was, yeah, we like added 100 gigawatts in a single year of battery power. So like growing extremely rapidly, but from a relatively small base. Now the other difference is how much energy is stored. There's a lot more energy. It's like how much energy can you store versus how much power can you get out of it at what point in time. Batteries are usually measured in what the instantaneous power is, and it's like on a single day thing. So then the question is, well, what happens when it's cloudy for a couple days? Talked about lithium batteries. Extremely good at frequency response. And this is a bunch of other options. So like really, when we talk about battery storage, we're talking about lithium. But there's a lot of innovation in this space, and all of them, all of the ones here at least, I believe are, like this isn't science fiction, it's the science actually works. Can we get it to scale? Does it have economic properties that will like fit with the current grid? So maybe I won't go into like every single one of them, but flywheels used to be the way that we did grid inertia before, I'll say synthetic grid inertia before batteries became really cheap. So you spin up a flywheel, and then it is the physical inertia that comes down. Iron air batteries I think are pretty cool, pretty inefficient from an end-to-end standpoint. It's like 50% efficient, but can store energy very cheaply. It's something like $20 per kilowatt hour instead of like 150 for lithium, and can store it for days. Iron air batteries are basically just like rust, and so you'll like make rust happen, and then you'll run rust in reverse to store energy. The vanadium redox stuff, it's a single, I don't know how, I'm clearly into battery technology stuff. With a single, usually with a battery you have an anode and a cathode, and they're different materials. With vanadium redox, it's the same material just in a different oxidation state, and it's liquid, and you pump it around, and so you just like, oh, you need a bigger battery, you like get more tanks, and you have more vanadium, and you can store energy for a long period of time there. Then you can also like, what else can you do? You can lift a weight and then drop it, right? You can run a train track up a hill and then drop it. There's the one about the Stirling engine and thermal. They're like these, what do you call it? Big, you get big boxes of sand that you heat up from like, from a heater, and then they stay hot, and then you run a Stirling engine to get the power back. So anyway, I figured I'd end with some like what's the state of the grid now? Because before I started researching, like all my numbers were in my head were from like a decade ago, and this one was interesting to me. We have come through a period where, was that, say 2005? Energy demand was basically flat, which hadn't happened. Like if you look back to like the whole history of America, you see like energy demand increases and then like, and it goes flat, and now it started kicking up again. So, and this is not to say like data centers aren't the problem, because they are, but it's sort of a return to growth that we hadn't seen for a while, right? So we haven't actually been adding capacity to the grid. This is the problem, is sort of the rate of change of how much generation can we add. You needed to have started, planning new generators 5 to 10 years ago, and now we're in that cycle. I believe this is a rate of change of, and then projected as well, meaning essentially all of the new generation being added to the grid right now is renewable. It's wind, and so it's mostly solar, with some wind, and coal is being retired. So at the margin, some coal plants might still stay online, but we're getting rid of them. Like they're very old, and they're also very polluting. But that should be the reason we're getting rid of all of them. Battery storage also, right, is the other big one. Yeah, question.
Excuse me, hang on. Can you wait for the microphone, please? Thank you. This is because it's being recorded.
I'm curious, I don't see nuclear generation here on any of your graphs.
Yeah, so this is the static point in time, how much of the grid's power came from the various sources in the first half of 2025. It's surprisingly hard to find exact numbers in graph form. I'm sure you can find them. But the difference between a couple of these graphs, and I'll bounce back and forth, is what are we adding new stuff of, and then what does the current grid look like? It looks a lot worse here. You see so much natural gas. Nuclear is around 20%, what is it, 18%, and the same thing with coal. And then solar and wind are growing very quickly, but from a relatively small base, right? So we will have coal and nuclear for a long time. I didn't get into I can get into the politics of nuclear as well. It is really nice to have nuclear plants as baseload. The US, I think, has just zero planned for the future. And so in order to build one, we'd need to start planning it now, and then maybe it will come online. And that might not be true. There's none that are going to land anytime soon, and then you need 5-10 years at least for them to start coming online. So I think it should be part of the puzzle, right? If it's me making industrial policy, I'm saying let's scale up everything that doesn't emit carbon as fast as possible, and then turn off the coal plants as fast as possible. But obviously we have to do it in a way that doesn't totally kill the grid.
The nuclear fraction varies a lot by state, right? In Illinois, it's much more. I mean, I don't know what it exactly, 50%. France is 90%, but
yeah.
And
we have quite a bit of nuclear, actually. The Dominion, I think, has quite a few nuclear plants. Which one is this? This is...
In Britain, coal is down to about 0 now. But it varies country to country, state by state in the US, yeah. I'm surprised coal is still so big on that graph.
Yeah. So I think this is sort of the end of my talk. Let's do questions and get into it, because I'm sure I could talk more about
Jane.
Whatever.
This looks like it's the U.S. What's happening worldwide?
Worldwide? Oh, I should have put a worldwide. It's roughly similar, I think, going off of my memory. I don't recall. I remember, so for China specifically, there's something like 50% coal, but adding way more. They're adding a bunch more nuclear than we are. It's the nuclear story in China is very promising, and way more battery and so I would say it's worse from a where the world is and better from where it's going than in the U.S.
I have a fun fact. Tidal power was used in Britain, in London, in the 17th century, because the River Thames came up and down with the tide, and they let the water come up, fill tanks, and then it ran down running a mill. So tidal power was used in Britain, in England then.
I really have two questions. The first one is the non-grid, that is local generation, so that you can cut off and be on your own, and then occasionally pop back on without tripping over everybody.
Yeah.
And the other is, all of this grid grew up as a fragmented system. It's unbelievably decentralized, and yet technologically it's all interdependent.
Yeah.
And no one seems to be coordinating, looking at security and superconducting transmission lines that are very expensive, and
Yeah.
a major overhaul of the whole thing.
Yeah. What can we talk about? I think the story, there would be another like 2-hour talk on just the history of the private sector building the grid out along with regulation happening or not happening. And there have been a little bit of what I read about, there were different ideas for how it should be regulated, anywhere from as laissez-faire as you can get it to like completely government managed from like in order to achieve various policy objectives. And like we didn't do either of those. We have this sort of weird public-private partnership. For instance, so like PJM, there are these regional interconnects. This is all going from memory, and I might have it wrong. But the Eastern grid is actually a handful of regional RTOs. I forget what RTO stands for. They're regional interconnect groups, separate corporations that then have relationships with all of the, like you are by law required as a utility to follow all these rules, and you can look up all the rules and like at what frequencies do you have to trip and like when you are not allowed to come offline. There's also a lot of market-based, you say markets, but like it's using money and contracts to decide like who's coming online when. And so like these battery projects are private financed efforts to then like make money by doing various things. They call it revenue stacking, when you can have different ways that you can make your money. And some is bulk energy transfer, so you're actually buying it and selling it at different times. And then the other times are grid services, and each one of them kind of has to make sense on its own economic merits, like let alone, you know, and again, like I'd like it better if instead of, I'd like some benevolent planner to look and say like, wouldn't it be nice if we had just a little bit more capacity? Maybe we could pay somebody to like, you know, have this more capacity so that when data centers want to come online, then we don't have to charge more for everybody.
A question from David here.
I was just wondering if you knew why demand flattened for about 20 years. I can tell you.
Yeah, tell me. I actually don't know.
LED lighting.
Is that it? We did it.
Lighting used to be incredibly inefficient. LEDs are very efficient, and that made a really big difference. Lighting used to be a major source of
awesome.
A major demand for power, and now it's much, much less significant.
Yeah.
Interesting. Evan.
So do you, kind of inverse to a question earlier, do you know the exact mix for like where the local electricity comes from?
Where our electricity comes from? Not off the top of my head. It is, I think it's a lower proportion of coal. I think it's a higher proportion of nuclear. And I think Dominion sends out a letter like once a year on here's what you're doing. Yeah, no, I haven't looked that up recently.
Sterling,
So.
wait.
So the question was, where does our local electricity come from? Well, one of the places that I know it comes from, and it used to be a major producer of electricity for us in Northern Virginia, is the Mount Storm coal-fired plant in West Virginia. Now, it's been supplanted by other energy sources since, but I'm sure it's still on the grid to provide power to us.
Got it.
That was a comment, right?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Or was that a question? Sterling, that was a comment, right?
Yeah, unless does anybody want to hear about the, you remember the Iberian Peninsula blackout? This one happened recently. Do we have another minute, or we have time? And so what was fascinating about this one is, I think it happened, it was last year, yeah, it was April 28th, 2025. And at the time, I thought it was like a cyber attack or something. Just normal, the regulation kind of hadn't caught up with what everybody in the grid was allowed to do. The gut reaction takeaway was like too much solar, right? Like too much, like renewables are the problem. And what it turns out, they did a, let me try and get all the details here. It was an over frequency event, right? So we were usually worried about under frequency events, which means too much load. But actually this one was going in the other direction where I think the imports and exports were not balanced. And based on what each of the segments was doing, let's see, it was, they actually simulated what would happen if there was more inertia, and that wouldn't have solved the problem. It was, let's see, right, so more flywheels wouldn't have done anything. What are the three of them? The rooftop solar made it worse. That's interesting. It was, I mean, in this case, it was because rooftops, like I think they didn't track it as well, feeding into the grid from rooftop solar. The other thing was the renewable plants were running in this fixed power factor mode. This was a regulation, so that they were not able to supply the reactive power. And what was the other thing? There were oscillating frequencies, apparently. They were like trying to balance frequencies between like different like megagrids. The takeaway was like every one of these is sort of a policy choice or like this isn't, ooh, renewables bad. It's like when your grid looks different now than it used to, like you need to change the rules about, the technical rules, not the like, some of it's policy, but like when do machines come online and offline, and when do solar plants inject reactive power or not? So they're probably going to fix a bunch of this stuff, but that was sort of like they did find out what was going on, and actually it's super complicated. So I didn't, I'm not doing it justice here, but don't take the fear, uncertainty, and doubt as a given.
Is there one more question? David. Sorry, not David.
Yeah. Hi, probably me, but I was a little confused in your diagram, in your charts.
Yeah.
I think at one point you were trying to show sources of inertial energy that's available, correct?
Is this one?
Okay. And then right, so those are all different sources. And then I thought you had a chart, then you showed some charts with who's producing what.
Yes. Yeah. So this is all about energy storage.
Right, so this is energy storage.
Yeah.
And at some point you were talking, I think, about who's producing energy.
Yes.
And
for the renewables?
so you've got to have, backup. So this is producing what? Who's producing, who's feeding the inertial storage, or is this producing?
No, this is adding new capacity to the grid in total. Like all of the examples that I gave are so small as to be negligible for the grid as a whole. Those are like pilots, and hopefully one of them ramps up, and in 10 years, then we're talking about right. One of them.
But at some point, you have to generate the power.
That's right. It's solar.
To restock, if you will.
Yeah. So
sources, right?
So the way that solar, I didn't get into this. The way that solar is built out, a couple of things are true about solar. One is they oversupply the like the DC, like they put more panels than the AC conversion can handle, and so instead of it being like the sun is rising and then setting, you'll get clipping, and so you'll have like a higher proportion of energy. So like the like more energy will come out that then needs to get stored somewhere, because you'll hear curtailment is what it's called when there's actually too much power and the grid not only doesn't need it, but like can't use it, right? And so adding more like it's interesting that we add battery storage here as like a generation or as like a way of putting more energy into the grid, because you're right, like batteries don't make power. They're actually absorbing the power from anywhere, but like really from photovoltaics. So like solar is the place where most of the power is coming from. Too many panels on purpose, and I don't know if that answered your question actually.
Okay. This is a change, right? So anyway, okay. Well,
Yeah,
thanks, Frank Tabir. Thank you very much for an interesting talk.
Thanks.
Next one, second Sunday in August, and if anybody has an inclination to give a talk, let me know. Thank you.